Here we go. Welcome, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, Vanessa, Hogle, my co-hostess, and down in the chat room, Shana, our chat Shananigator, shaking everything up down there. With us again tonight, coming back, is James Annitto, Demonologist. We had him on about this time last year, and we were just saying a moment ago, James, we also had you on for that episode of Inside the Upside Down where we covered demons in Hollywood. So, yeah. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. So, but just to refresh everybody's memory, or new people, or people that are new to the show and didn't see that episode or those episodes last year, as a refresher, you're a deacon in the Catholic Church. But how did you get into being a demonologist?
Well, like you said, I'm a deacon of the old Catholic Church, and how I got into demonology was basically a long history of things that occurred to me as a child. And at one point, my distaste for God and why God would do something like that to me. And really, I really delved deep into a lot of theology books, a lot of philosophers, anthropologists, science, Darwinism, all these different things that could either disprove or prove God. And even at a young age, I would pick up books. I'd go to the library, read these books, because that's what you had to do at the time. Dial-up was starting to come out, basically. And so you still would have to go back to the library at that point in time. So I'd go to the library as a child and go read these books. And basically, really what brought me into the paranormal was God, because, I watched Unsolved Mysteries. That was something that my mom, or my grandma, actually, technically, my grandma and my grandfather would play all the time. And I would watch the Unsolved Mysteries. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then, of course, Scooby-Doo was one of my favorites. And Tales of the Crypt and all these things,
Right.
Which a child shouldn't watch in some way, because it really kind of made me imagine. And some of it was spooky and scared me. But when I get the concept of spirits and ghosts and all that unseen stuff, angels and demons, which of course, are part of the Bible and a stanza, and I of course read it when I was younger. I did go to church. I was forced into church. Of course, I was rebel, like I said, and so I questioned a lot of things. But the spirits and the ghosts and that concept, the paranormal, cryptids, Bigfoot. But more so the spirits kind of made me delve deep and said, if I can figure out, and of course I was young and brash, if I could figure out what spirits and ghosts and all this terminology was, maybe I could come a lot closer to figure out what God was. And so I got into paranormal investigating around probably 14, 15 years old, basically about the time Ghost Hunters did come out, which, I live in Rhode Island. And of course, a bunch of people from Rhode Island were on a television show about paranormal investigating. And
I wonder who those guys were.
Yeah, right. So I that really did intrigue me as well. And, but we used to go out to graveyards and cemeteries and a bunch of other places that technically we shouldn't be involved in or been at. And of course, I was young, stupid, reckless. We didn't do anything dumb, but we weren't supposed to be in these buildings. But so we'd do these things, we'd have these developed cameras, and basically doing that went from a hobby to a passion to something that I basically am involved with every day of my life beside my career and my daytime job, if that what it is. And so doing these investigations, I started getting to residential cases. And of course, within theology, there's demonology. And of course, I was very liking of Carl Johnson and Keith Johnson, who were also on Ghost Hunters, and they were coined as demonologists on the show, and that intrigued me. So basically doing residentials, but I was also a part of Carl Johnson's team Beyond the Veil with Dino Palazzini as their tech manager, so I got to work with Carl firsthand as well. So with a lot of these mixtures of things and doing residential cases and coming across a case that I couldn't help in, really what brought me into the demonology realm, what brought me into the ministry aspect of it as well, because it kind of awoke in me. I can collect all this data and I can prove or try to prove ghosts exist. But if somebody's scared in their home or something is very bad, and it wasn't a bad case, it was just something that, they were scared of. how can I help that person? What's the next step? And that's really what raced through my head. And it's basically what was the launching pad. And that was 9 years ago. I've been involved in demonology for about 9 years, and I've been involved in paranormal for 15 years now. And the ministry work of it as well. It's been about 9 years. And it's just been it's been a road, but it's, I don't distaste God anymore. I think this road that I went down, actually, of course, being a clergy member, actually brought me closer to God. And I've seen things that, I don't take for granted because of what I've experienced. I think I was meant to experience it.
That's actually, it's interesting that you end with that, because that was actually going to be one of my questions. First, I worked with Carl and Dina as well, many moons ago.
Good people.
They're good people.
They are.
It was a bad house, bad scene, great people. Love them. But that was, you kind of already answered this, but I want to delve into it just a little bit. You said you were dealt a very difficult hand in your upbringing, that this didn't start because of paranormal stuff. It started because of your search for God and answers due to your upbringing. Similar situation with me in the upbringing. I'm sure in different in ways, but unnecessary and very, very difficult.
Yeah.
However, regardless of faith, regardless of path, I believe we're chosen to go through those horrible things so that we have a better understanding of how to help those who don't know how to deal with those horrible things. Would you agree with that?
I do. I learned, I'm only 29 years old, but I've faced a lot of trials and tribulations. And, I'm very persistent in nature. So I keep going strong as best as I can. I do believe that you have to see the ugly aspect of life to see the beauties of life. And once you get through those ugly aspects and you see that beauty, then you realize that life is not as bad as other people say it is. You're going to go through your bumps and your roadblocks, but as long as you keep going through it, life is beautiful. And if these things weren't meant to impede us, then how would we grow? How would we adapt? We wouldn't. We would just live a boring life, and it would not be fun.
Exactly. So I posted this about a week or so ago. I'm like, they call them road bumps, not road walls.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, you're meant to go over it. You're meant to crest it and come out on the other side, not stop. And I think that that's where people get really disheartened and disillusioned, is they think that those things shouldn't happen. Even you questioned, why is this happening to me? And I, that's something that I really do in my heart. I know that from before we're born, we're chosen to go through those things.
Yeah. I think, I think there's a lot of people that don't have the drive, and unfortunately they don't. And, and there's people that want to blame things that are not seen. And there's so much things that we take for granted. And it's terrible, but I think if people opened up and, realized that you have to go through the swamp, you have to go through the mud to get through to the greener pastures, a lot of people would be more mindful of being persistent and going through. But we break, we're human. It just happens, unfortunately. But faith's a big component of that. It doesn't have to be faith in a God. We have a component of our brain that is built on faith. If we wouldn't have that in our brain if it was not meant there for a reason. So faith's very powerful, regardless of what it's faith in. It could be faith in yourself, faith in God, could be faith in you achieving something. Faith's powerful.
True story. I agree.
Got a couple of super chats here. Want to recognize them. Tom McNicholas, $5 super chat. Tammy Heitzman, $10 super chat. And Scotty Fox, an Australian, $2 super chat. So thank you all very, very much. I know Tom, Scotty Fox did the cool new super sticker thing.
That is neat.
It is. Tammy Heitzman said, awesome to see James back. Yay. And Tom also said, good to see James again. So very cool.
Hey, guys.
So, James, you mentioned earlier, and then we'll get to some of the questions from the viewers because there's a couple of good ones here. You had mentioned earlier that you're kind of pushed into religion at the outset, that your relationship with God initially, was not a good one, but yet you got called to do this. What is there a particular event that happened, or what was it that really kind of like brought you around, and you're like, this is actually the direction I want to go. This is my path.
Oh, well, the paranormal aspect, which really, I would say till probably 19, I was very on the question about religion and God. And I really switched very fast because of experiences I had investigating. I experienced firsthand accounts of what I would believe would be spirit phenomenon. And, it really opened my eyes at this. So this I wouldn't say answer, maybe a personal answer to myself, because maybe other people don't believe me. It was a personal experience. There's no data to show that this happened or existed. So, but when I started having these experiences, and I haven't seen like full body apparitions out the wazoo, but these things that have occurred and these different pathways that I've seen really started opening the ability for me to have a personal answer that spirits and ghosts in some form exist. I don't know what they are, but they exist. So if something like this exists, then that possibility God exists, or something of similar nature is plausible. And with that mindset, I started dealing with cases that, like I said, people wanted help. And what really was the initial point of me actually strengthen myself with faith is actually I was in the military for a short time. And when I was away, basic and AIT, and I went to Fort Leonard Wood, I actually would go to church every Sunday to get away from cleaning the barracks. And
I know from that.
One day I found a church that I went, and they said, "Who would like to get baptized?" And there was a jolt of energy in me. And I've actually never told this story really before, so you're getting a
new
first-hand
stuff.
account. But basically, what happened is I went to that church. It was the Church of Christ, and I later became ordained actually through the Church of Christ before I went to Catholicism and became a deacon with the Catholic Church. But I went to that church, and of all the other times I went to the churches, I went to Gospels, Baptists, and all these other different things, and I would just try to fall asleep with the drill sergeants without them seeing me. I just went, and they said, "Who would like to get baptized?" And like I said, a jolt of energy went through me, and I got baptized that day. And that really was a big turning point for me, but it was definitely the cases that I experienced. And I would say I really didn't also believe in demons until my first demonic possession case. And then that light switch happened. This stuff does exist. I was always questionable about it too, but experiencing these little things really strengthened my connection to God. And I really understood and to my personal opinion, what God is. And, through lots of research within theology and of course going to seminary within the Catholic Church, it really has structured my ability to understand, in my opinion, what God is and my faith for God. So it really has been a process of 29 years, basically, because even though I was 1 year old and I didn't know what's going on, this path happened for a reason. Like we talked about earlier, and I do believe I was called to do this. There was two things I wanted to do when I was a child. I would either want to be a police officer or a priest. And the reason I wanted to be a priest was so I could get more knowledge about God. And even though I believe in God now and I have a stronger connection to God, but also in the same aspect, the closer you get to God, the harder things get. I also understand that as well, and it's happened. But it's been a process, and it's been a journey, and it's been eye opening.
Yeah. I've just gotta let you know real quick. So in basic training, I was a Catholic chapel guide.
Oh, no.
I can see that.
Yeah, it happened. So we have some pretty good questions here from the chat room. So we'll get to a couple of these now, and then we'll get to some others later as we go along. But the first one that came across, Brandy Starleaper, what is the scariest encounter you've had?
Uh, I've experienced what a lot of people would call scary, and I've had that. My body's telling me get the hell, the fight or flight scenario that your mind happens, your chemical reactions happen, and I've wanted to flee so many times, but I stood there and fought, and stood there for the family, and did everything in my ability to help them get through the process they was going through. So a lot of those moments are scary because you're dealing with people, and that's scary, and you have to be very careful with dealing with that. So it's scary. So all those moments are scary. But I would have to say the scariest moment I ever, and I can only talk about a little bit of it because it's personal details, but the first possession case I was talking to you about, where I didn't believe demons truly existed, and my psychologist was involved, and other people were involved, and I was called in. And what I experienced, I don't know what I experienced. I was out of this world, but really, really is what changed me. And I had experienced maybe infestation or very negative cases beforehand, but to experience your first possession probably was the scariest thing. It probably follows me to this day. A lot of those cases do. Some have given me nightmares, and the funniest thing is I tell people is I talk after a case like that. There's times I talk to a therapist and I go see somebody, because you have to get it off your mind. You have to separate it from you, and it lingers with you. And there's been times I had nightmares, and that one case lingered with me for a long time. And I would have to say that would be the scariest thing I've ever experienced.
Okay, and I know Vanessa's going to have some stuff here to ask, but one more here from the chat room, and then we'll let Vanessa add it. This from Leslie Fear. James, how do you know if you're dealing with demons? Do you feel it? Is it a telepathic type situation?
So I'm not an exorcist. When demonic possession's involved, I believe you should call upon an exorcist. And of course, I guess I am biased. I'm part of the Catholic Church, but I am also very open to everybody else's opinions and beliefs, and the other rites of exorcisms that have existed within Hinduism and Judaism. So I understand that, but so exorcists have four things. Let's say, to be a little bit more open, is you're wearing a blessed cross and it's hidden, and you're not even a clergy, you don't have the collar, so they don't even know, but they know that you're wearing that, and they say that you're wearing that, and they never knew that you knew that. So that suspicion, and that awareness of blessed items or religious items. What we like to say also is speaking in tongues, which always people misunderstand speaking in tongues, like they think it's like pig Latin or something like that. But speaking in tongues is basically speaking in the language that you're not fluent in,
right.
and you're being able to speak it. So Latin's a very hard language to learn, but there is ability for you to learn it. I've learned little bits of it here and there, and but there's other languages like fluently German, fluently other languages that somebody that is 20 or 60 or 80 that's never been to any of these countries, never had any of that training within those languages and speak those languages. That's another thing. But how they really get to that process, though, before an exorcist is involved, is the most important of it all, of determining what if somebody is really truly dealing with a demonic entity, especially with a demonic possession. If anybody claims possession, they automatically have to go get it through a psychological evaluation. They have to go through a primary care physician. They have to go through all these steps. They have to go through data collecting. They have to go through the exorcist being involved, or a priest being involved, or a demonologist being involved, and dissecting the case, going there physically, and seeing if they're on medications. The one true thing I would tell people, and I don't say I'm clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant. I don't associate to any titles. I believe I have a good ability of discernment, and best way I can tell people is I go through all these processes, because, like I said, you are dealing with people, and you got to deal. There's process. There's a reason exorcisms have this longevity of a process before anybody gets involved, because there's dangers to it. But yeah, so there's just a process, and it's long. But in my personal opinion, the experiences that I've had, and I've only had 5 experiences with 5 cases that I would emphatically call demonic out of many, many cases that I've ever done, which is probably in the 400 plus cases area, depending on my case files in my file cabinet. That's a rough estimate.
All right.
And but what I really came through with a lot of those cases was the feeling. And I've investigated a lot of places. I've investigated a lot of residentials, as I just said. And the feelings I've had at these cases was immense. And of course, with all the other things and all the other characteristics happening, but that feeling was immense. And mind you, like I say, I don't associate as a psychic medium or any of those other things, but I felt like in that location, and I felt it further away as well, but in that location, in the presence of whatever was there, what I would believe would be called demonic, I felt like the punching in the solar plex over and over and over and over and over again. It was just immense. And like I said, that fight or flight, a chemical reaction was going to my brain the whole time. Dude, you got to get out of here. Dude, you got to get out of here. And I'm like, no, I can't leave. I can't. So in those kind of cases, I believe that is what goes through your mind. There's a lot of mental warfare, spiritual warfare going on. It's trying to beat you. It's trying to mentally affect you. So, and it's also physically making you have reactions to its mass, its force that it's there. So that is one of the prime things that I can say that I look forward to, because if something that can generate that much immense force, and you can feel it, and that's only happened in those cases that I would say I would call demonic. Those 5 cases, nothing else I've ever experienced that immense feeling before. Yeah,
so and demonic cases are a lot more rare than people understand. So having 5 is actually a pretty good number.
Oh yeah, well, a lot. I know people that say they've dealt with it a lot more, and I've looked at these cases, and maybe I would look at it differently. But I really dissect. I'm very analytical when it comes to these things. I don't like to call things paranormal unless, and it's hard to call something paranormal in a way, or say it's a ghost or it's a demon, because we're looked at as a pseudoscience, so there's no fact technically to what we do. So it's really hard to terminologize things, and look at certain things and then talk about it, because somebody else will say that was demonic, but I will look at it and say, no, I don't believe it was, because there's certain things people look at, but there's also misunderstandings that it could be something else as well. Like, a lot of people get demonic infestation cases mixed up with level 5 poltergeist cases. There's levels to poltergeist cases. People tend to forget there's levels to that, and the higher level poltergeist cases are very severe,
right? And
they get mixed up in that demonic bubble all the time.
Okay,
go for it, Vanessa.
First off, I'm going to back you up on something.
All right.
I have a dear friend in Ireland who was entrusted by the church, by the Catholic Church, for specific cases to go through the inch-thick paperwork with each individual person in regards to one of these cases before the Vatican would get involved.
Yep.
You are 100% correct on that. For anybody that might question that, what you're saying is absolute truth.
There's documentation for everything within that case.
Everything. And there is the same questions asked over and over in different configurations, in between other questions meant to elude or to try to trip you up, to see if you are
your story changes
in a case. Exactly. See if your story changes. So you're 100% correct in that. My question for you, and I want you to be brutally honest.
All right.
Here it comes.
Okay. I actually mean it.
Right.
Have you ever dealt with a case or with a person who seems to attract the negative side of this demon or otherwise, but there is but that particular entity is almost protective of the person?
So what we would call that, and it's really never talked about as much. There, everybody talks about infestation, oppression, and possession, or within possession, there's transient possession or perfect possession. There's two difference in that category, but everybody tends to forget obsession. And I believe that would follow in that realm of obsession. So in that case, I have dealt with people that are obsessed, maybe have conjured something up, that maybe that entity that is there is very protective of that person because they have control over that person. Because we can't, when we conjure, we think we have that ability to control these things that are much
What if you
powerful.
never conjured?
And then you meant well, I know somebody like that. There's a person that's out here, and I won't say names because I don't like to ridicule people, but there's a person out here that contacts the whole New England area, and everybody's dealt with him. He emails me, and I actually physically went there with an individual and somebody that had a psychology degree. And we got so many red flags, and he contacts everybody saying he's possessed, and he truly is not. We don't believe, nobody that has ever dealt with this case believe he's truly possessed. And unfortunately, it is mental illness. So, but he emphatically believes he's possessed, and for 6-7 years now has been on this rampage contacting people saying, help me, I'm possessed. But so in that circumstance, yeah, I've dealt with it. There's a lot of people that really want to be possessed, but you also got to understand, one of the things that I look at, and a lot of other people that I do that do it right look at as well, is if somebody is claiming they are possessed, they are not possessed, most likely 90% of the time. Because guess what? A possessed person doesn't know they are possessed,
right?
Because they just don't. It doesn't work that way. This demon doesn't want that person to know. That's not how breaking of free will happens. It happens through the shadows. It happens through so many devious acts, and these people think that their life's going to hell. They start pushing people away. They break these people down mentally, so that even though these people don't necessarily know it, they mentally give up. Their faith, they just break down. And that breakdown right there is that ability for that spirit or that demonic entity or entity to come in. So, obsession is a very bad thing, and it has gotten a lot worse throughout the years because of certain things.
Well, I'm talking about me, right? And I'm not possessed.
Yeah,
you're not.
I no.
Oh, so you're saying you have a spirit that protects you?
Yes.
Oh well, yeah.
But he's not the best person. And I have actually one time come face to face with something I would consider what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And when I came face to face with it, there was an understanding.
Yeah, well,
it's a very bizarre feeling. I can't explain it. I questioned myself after that particular experience.
Well, I know there's people that, and I'm not against that stuff because it's, I'm very open to everything and understanding. But I know people that have spirit guides that supposedly that they are spirits that might necessarily not be good. They come across and this, and now they're their spirit guides or they're whatever these you want to call them. They go their astral realm. They're there. And they communicate to them and stuff like that. But it is as long as it's not for the bad use of the bad, then it is what it is,
Yeah,
as long as it protects you, right?
Very well.
There you go.
But was not always the nicest to me, but I've got a handle on that. So
yeah, as long as you got a handle on it, You know, it's the one thing that I try to tell people about this field, and the paranormal in general, and that this encompasses UFOs, cryptids. When you go out and search for the unknown, there's dangers, and you know, as long as you're not in danger, and as long as you know that, then there you go. You know, it is dangerous though, the unknown.
Yes, very much so.
Hey, James, you mentioned it a moment ago, and I'm going to jump to Tom McNicholas's question
All right.
it addresses it. How often are these cases that are supposedly supposed to be demonic possession, how often are they actually mental illness?
Well, I'm not a clinical psychologist. I get these people involved that have Psy or PhD degrees, and that is their specialty. You know, I try to make sure people get the right evaluations, or you know, I work with people that are very open to understanding that they're not just going to throw these people on drugs, because most drugs are placebo anyway. There's only, you know, but there's a good aspect of them that there are mental illnesses involved, but that doesn't also decredit the person that are having experiences. I've had people that have had bipolar 1 or 2. They take their medication and they experience activity, but they take their medication, maybe side effects, maybe whichever. But these people, I experience things there. I don't have bipolar 1 or 2. I might have something in the DSM-5, a disorder that could probably thousands of them from the DSM-5 that could credit me as some sort of disorder. Yeah, you read that book, you think you're crazy. But so I've dealt with a lot of people that have had mental illnesses, but that doesn't discredit them either. But unfortunately, like I said, if you're claiming possession, there are red flags right there and then, and there could be good chance that there is a mental illness. But you can't, as somebody that is not a clinical psychologist or just a regular investigator and doesn't have no psychology background, it is not our job to judge those people or try to dissect and say that they are crazy or they have mental illness. Bring that to the professional. You know, if you're dealing with people in their homes, just make sure that you're doing them justice, especially in that situation, because you're not there just to help them in a spiritual aspect or a paranormal aspect. You're there to help them in general as best as you can. And you got to make sure that you're helping them as best as you can. So
have you found that certain medications can actually open somebody up more than they already are to that type of
there are
issue?
medications out there that affect the chemical imbalances. You know, there's a lot of theory right now in the psychology field about the pituitary gland, you know, that being the third eye. And there's a lot of good actually stuff coming out about that in that area. So I believe that if, you know, you maybe take a certain medication, I can't really give you ones off the top of my head, but there are ones that do affect you, and there's clear warnings. You watch some of the television shows that, you know, some of the warnings is you might have numbness, or you might have a loss of memory, certain things like that that affect you, or there's certain medicines within the psychology realm of things that affect your neural waves, and that's very few in between that affect your neural waves. But you know, I think that anything that could affect your chemical imbalance, within your mind, within your brain, there could be possibilities, you know. So you have to definitely look at that, and that's why it's important, if you deal with people, you get their medication list and you research it, or you bring it to somebody that can properly give you a diagnosis of every single medicine that person's on. And that's usually
the contraindications between multiple
because
if
that could happen.
if they affect each other, you know, if there's hallucinations, you know, that's important.
Yeah. So let me jump to this question. I know there's others in between. We'll get to them, but this one's pertinent. So this one's from Keith Bailey. And so he asks, then what could be the first sign that you could be dealing with a true demonic case?
What's the first sign?
Yeah.
Personally, it would be the feeling. I feel like the body's the best tool. You're the best tool. You know, you can have all these gadgets and stuff like that, but it is that immense feeling that it's really hard for me to tell people this is what you'll feel, because they might feel something different. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll feel it. I've talked to a lot of people that do what I do, and they've had the same feeling. So I do believe that is a piece of the puzzle to figuring that case out. But if something immensely shakes you, and some people say I have abilities, that's great and all, but I've had people involved in those kind of cases that still trembled, and they didn't even believe in the paranormal. They trembled. So that's one of the things I look at. I think that's the most important thing. If your body's telling you something, you usually listen to your gut, and usually it doesn't fail you.
Yep, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
But also in the same sense, though, if you are helping if you are attempting to help a person and you come across something, don't run and leave them there. Do your best to help them, and then try to bring somebody else to help these people. Because if you just run out of there and when you experience it, you've just scarred these people for life.
Right. Shadowcat asks, this is kind of interesting. Do demons have free will, or are they controlled?
It's open to interpretation. You got to remember, demonology is a branch of theology, and theology and it's the study of God and religion, right? So to me, theology is a science. It's a science of God, because most studies are a science. Theology has been debated for many centuries. So there is many different theories and opinions on that. Some say they are controlled by Lucifer. Some say they have free will. But in reality, if you think about it, if God created all, God created us, we have free will. So I think it's really the biggest debate. They could have free will. I do believe they possibly do, because if God gave it to us, then there's the big possibility they have it. If they were able to fall from the graces of God and rebel, that means they probably have free will, unless God allowed it. And of course, that's a lot of debate as well, that God did allow it for a reason. So that's a century, that's over multiple century long debate. We could have a discussion on that the whole show. So it's possible.
Yeah, because I want to ask you to follow up on that, like the Goetta grimoires, which basically came out of the Middle Ages, and they're supposed to be based on older texts. And if you read through that, these different demons have different ranks and functions, and like this whole hierarchy, and all that. I guess people wonder, is that real, or is this almost like demon folklore?
Well, it could be folklore. The problem with a lot of those names are a lot of those names come from centuries and centuries of different texts, different religions. It's a compilation of what's been kind of gathered through many different civilizations. So those are names that have come from situations. When a lot of people know in exorcism, you ask the name. A lot of those names have been compiled from those rituals from many different religions. So I think there's some accuracy to it, but it's how you take it. There, if you look at the Goetta, which you're talking about, and then you look at different encyclopedias and dictionaries written by different people and philosophers within theology, there's different hierarchy systems. There's multiple different ones. There's one that goes by the sins. There's ones that, like you're talking about, that are very long in length of how many demons. But I think it's a possibility. I think that there's some accuracy to it, because those names have come from circumstances and from situations. But now, where I would say back to claiming you're possessed, one of the things I hear all the time, and deals with this, is people getting demon names through audio recordings or through ghost boxes and stuff like that. Or more so the audio recordings, when you're asking intelligent questions. You got to remember, a demon won't give its name out, but unless it's forcefully asked, and it's not going to be graciously given. So it's also very intelligently known on that realm of things. What we are talking to, they also know these demon names as well, because they mess with us.
Right.
It happens. I've heard recordings, Beelzebub or something like that, which supposedly nobody was involved. Or I've gotten recordings of certain names, and you're like, yeah, all right, you're messing with us, because guess what? A demon's not going to do that. It lurks in the shadow. It's not just going to say out, "Hey, my name's Fred. how you doing? I'm here to get you.
Right.
You know, so it's just like, but that falls in suit. You know, these things have these names have been centuries old. So there's some, I think, some truth to it, or some plausibility to it.
Okay. Very cool. So, Vanessa, if you have another question, go for it. Otherwise, we have a whole list.
I do, just real quick.
Okay.
On the, you say that if somebody claims to be possessed, that is a red flag.
Oh yeah.
However, if you have, how do you find the people that are possessed? Because they have to have situations happening to make them question it in order to seek help, in order to go through the rigmarole of finding out whether or not they are.
Well, it's not the possessed person that reaches out. It's the people around them, their family or a friend that reaches out to people. It's usually not the possessed individual unless there's somebody telling them, I think you're possessed. And that might happen. From what I understand, it has happened for people that, you know, other colleagues have dealt with. But I guess unless they're being told by outside forces, paranormal team, and telling them they're possessed. Like I've had many times where I've been brought in by a team and they've told the client it's demonic, and I've concluded, at the eventually of everything that I dealt with and looked at, I concluded it's not to be demonic.
That is extremely dangerous for a team to go in and tell somebody.
Oh, it is. So it's in that case, you know, it's you know, it just gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah, you saw the look, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, flames.
It's bad. It's bad,
Yes.
you know, because people don't understand. And, you know, I've been talking about it a lot because, you know, through time, you gain knowledge. Exorcism, for an exorcist, an exorcism is psychotherapy. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, performed exorcisms. So when you're dealing with people that could believe they're possessed or are possessed, or maybe are dealing with something that maybe has mental illness, and you're telling them that they have demons involved, especially if you're Christian, most people think you get demons from sinning or I did something wrong. So when you drop that word to these people that might not necessarily be dealing with a demon, you really have that, they really start evaluating everything. And what did I do? And they start blaming themselves. They start beating themselves up. There's a lot of negative emotions that come over them, a lot of emotions in general. So it's dangerous when you do that to people, because you got to remember, you drop the D word, you get to go home in your own bed at night, and they get to have nightmares all night while there's a demon in their house. You can't conclude things with just one visit. And this has happened to me before where I've dealt with it, but I've also made my mistakes. You know, I did, unfortunately, one time in my time doing this, misdiagnosed the case. And things happen, but I worked through it, and I fixed my mistakes as best as I could, and reevaluated the situation, and I cleaned up the mess as best as I could, you know, and you learn from these things, but it happens all the time, you know, and from sometimes the same team, it's bad. You know, they don't learn from their mistakes. They don't want to learn the different credentials and characteristics of certain hauntings, and they just want it to be demonic. And it stinks, because when you say that word, you're really you're psychologically affecting somebody. You are putting them in a different mindset.
Absolutely.
Yep. Definitely. So this one is from Zippy Davis from a bit earlier on. He says, I believe in God also, but they say spirits don't exist unless angel or demon. What made you finally see that's not true and that they do exist?
Well, it's not necessarily like theology debate again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Bible technically says one thing. There is biblical law, and there's the Gospels, and then there's theology, which goes beyond the Bible. There's many different scriptures and writings beyond the Bible, in Christian format as well, and of course other religions. You know, there's, I believe, 4,200 different religions, faiths, beliefs out there. 4,200 religions.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. So you have to be very mindful and open of others' experiences, especially, you know, you look at modern religions, the oldest being Hinduism being the oldest. They have an exorcism rite. Where do you think a lot of things come from? So a lot of things take from each other. So there's just so much to look at within that. So that's like I said, that's a hard one. Theology is very expansive.
You're absolutely correct, though. I held in
but-
my hands a Freemason's Bible, over 300 years old,
Yeah,
just a couple of weeks ago. And people would be surprised at what they talk about in religion and their.
Oh yeah, but you got there's chats of Christianity, of purgatory and restless spirits, and we don't really understand the concept of what heaven, hell, and purgatory is, if purgatory does exist within those realm of things. But we don't ever really understand what heaven, hell, or purgatory is. So for say spirits don't exist in the Bible, there's many, especially for people that go by the Bible within Christianity, is that there, and it's important, of course, is that there's many talks of spirit actually within it. For one of them all, the Holy Spirit, as spirit right there, right? So there's many talks within the Bible of some representation of spirit, and people sometimes read through the lines of that. And of course, you hear about mediums and psychics and stuff like that within the Bible. And, but I think one of the biggest things that you could take from that is beware false prophets. And you have to beware who you're talking to, beware what you're thinking you're talking to. And that is falls back to why the Bible says don't talk to spirits or don't talk to psychics and mediums, because I'm not necessarily agreeing with that.
You're not advocating that.
I have a lot of friends that are psychics and mediums, and I have a lot of great friends that have different sort of abilities. But you got to remember, when you try to create communication with something that you can't necessarily see, or you believe you can see through a third eye, and you're open to communication, even as an investigator with the device, there's dangers to it. As like I said, it's unknown, and that is why the Bible states what it does, because it is dangerous. It is dangerous. You shouldn't seek, and some people do this. They seek out spirit for answers of their personal life, when the Bible says you should seek out God for questions on your personal life, not something that you can't. Well, you can't see God technically, but in the same understandability of it is that's why they say it's dangerous. They don't say spirits don't exist.
Okay. Well, I think that clears it up a little bit in any case.
I hope so.
I hope so. Yeah. So this one is from Gina Bizarro. She asked, my biggest question mark in paranormal contact is whether or not the voices coming through are actually the loved one or a negative spirit in disguise. What are your thoughts on that?
Like I said, the dangers of the unknown. You always have to be careful and cautious of what you're communicating to. It is highly important. I tell a lot of people, and I'm clergy. When I go into cases, I have my Saint Benedict's crucifix, and I have, my Saint Benedict's on my keychain. I'm wearing my clerics, and, in some cases I fast, or some cases I'm in a very positive mindset. I prayed all day or whichever. And, you're not untouchable, and you can wear this stuff. If it happens, it happens. If you're egotistical, you think you're untouchable, you can be touched at any point in time. So that's why when you're communicating with anything, you always have to be cautious. I think there's certain things that maybe that a loved one will know that maybe a negative entity won't know. So ask personal questions. Don't ask very broad questions. Ask narrow questions. And if those narrow questions can be answered where you would feel that person was the only person that would know, then there's a good chance that you are talking to a loved one. But if you ask broad questions and you're getting responses, you always should be cautious. Ask the narrow questions and see if they can be answered.
That's good advice. Definitely. All right, we got. I'm probably not going to get to all these questions, guys. You guys asked a bunch of questions. So there's a lot of things in here. And some of them are interrelated. So, like this one, Kathy Cillian. So, demons must be very sneaky, hiding themselves. How is it, or why is it that they give themselves up?
Well, they don't necessarily give themselves up. If a person lived by themselves and I think really what gives it up is if somebody's going through their depression stage, right? So let's say, so basically how it works, and I'll say it quick. The infestation stage is basically the demon targeting a family or person, and that then once things have occurred, oppression starts happening once the demon finds their target. Depression basically is basically starting to break them down, starting to get away from family, friends, and very change of personality. And basically, when that free will breaks or that faith breaks, then possession, transient possession happens. Transient is more when the entity comes comes back and forth because the person is still battling by free will. And then the perfect possession is when the free will is fully broken, the entity has full control. So yeah, it's yeah. It's long. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's great information, and they're appreciating it down in the chat room. So that's thank you very much for taking time to answer their questions.
No problem.
We are getting down toward the end of the show, though. We have about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to get to, and a lot of people were asking earlier about the Warrens and had some questions there. So I wanted to throw this out there because we talked about it briefly when I saw you in Rhode Island here. Saw a video out there on my friend Brittany Crabb's channel, which is Britty44, and she had gone for the release of Annabelle to the Warren Occult Museum. And there was a very familiar guy standing there giving a blessing, which I'm looking at the video. I'm like, that's James Annitto. I swear to God, that's James. And it was you. So I asked you about that. But so people were asking about the Warren. So, what is, I guess, the Warren's museums like? And, do you feel that there are demons attached to the objects that are in there?
Well, I have a lot of immense respect for what the Warrens cultivated. I had the pleasure to meet Lorraine once before her untimely death, and that was a long time ago. Never met Ed. I have a lot of respect for them. Going to the museum, of course, and having the ability to do a blessing there was a great honor. To be asked by Nesper and specifically Tony Spera. It's definitely a great honor. Not they usually have a local priest do it, but they asked me to do it this time. And it was it was a great experience, and it was fun. I got to hang out with the Nesper team, and it's a cool place. There's a lot of cool history to it. A lot of most famous cases, a lot of the items are there from their books that they have written. So there's just a lot of different energy to it. A lot of words to say because there's just so many different objects that you grew up hearing about. So it's kind of like, to me, it's like seeing Waverly Hills every time. Every time I go to the museum, it's just like, whoa! The people that sat here, Ed sat here, Lorraine sat here. They talked about their cases. As far as the items, I do believe in items having attachments, not possession. Sometimes you hear the words possessed items.
Right.
The only things that can be possessed are people are things with free will, and usually that's humans because we're the only ones that technically have free will out of other living creatures. And so in that stanza, I do believe in haunted items, and I do believe that there could be items there that do have bindings to them where these entities cannot leave these items and go on to other locations and haunt or cause mayhem. So I do believe that there's items in there that could have the possibility of entities being involved by binding of these items. Especially, of course, Annabelle, you hear all the stories of people that have touched her or have said rude things and mocked her, and there's been deaths from it. So it's definitely another thing that's dangerous, and you have to, like I told people in that video, when you go in that museum and you're around these items, you really have to have a positive intent and a good attraction. If you go in there with the wrong intent and the wrong attraction, because the laws of attraction, the laws of intent are very powerful things in what we do, is if you have bad intent and bad attraction, you might get what you don't want, or you might get what you want actually. But and I told those people, after I did a blessing on them, or actually before I did a blessing on them, to go in there with that positive intent. And I think if you do so, I don't think those items can affect you.
Yep. All right. Awesome. Very cool. So we're really at our hour mark. I know it went by fast. And we're not going to get to all of these questions. I do apologize for that, everyone. But we want to give the last minute or two here for James to go ahead and let us know where people can find him. And then, of course, we need to get to your shout-outs, which I missed last week. So, James, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Facebook, James Annitto, Annitto. If you are experiencing issue, you can call me 401-808-7416. JamesAnnitto.com. I will be this Saturday for Tim Miley and Portographs for Pooches. I'll be at the Hinsdale House with a great bunch of lineup of people: Tim Woolworth, John Cassidy, Tim Shaw, Tim Miley, myself. And then the following week, and I'll see you there, Mike, as you announced it. I'll be involved with the Demonology panel with Tim Shaw and John Zaffis, and of course we'll pay our respects to Rosemary, who was originally supposed to be a part of it as well, but that's Michigan Paracon, which is a very big one. So next 2 weeks, this Saturday and next week, pretty busy. Look forward to it. So if you're at Michigan or you're in New York and want to go to the Hinsdale, I believe there's still tickets available for Hinsdale. Come by.
Awesome. Yep. If you're in those areas, go check them out and ask them your questions directly. So, all right. Awesome. Thank you very much, James. And we're going to get to our shout outs here real quick.
Thank you.
So, James, you can hang out or take off with whichever one you want to do. We're going to say thank you to everybody. But thank you, James, for being a part of this tonight.
Thank you for having me. Let's do a part 3 a lot sooner than a year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. We'll definitely do it again. For sure.
Perfect. Sounds good, guys.
Don't forget to watch after.
I will. I'm going to watch.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. So what Vanessa's talking about is the new Beyond the Shadows at the Haunted Road Media Facebook page, facebook.com/Haunted Road Media, where she's going to be discussing haunted relics from Ireland, religious relics. So
that I have with me.
And she has